Good afternoon, Dustin, Rader. Welcome to Mentoring Monday.
Thank you for having me.
Lily, and this is Dr. Mahoney. You've met her before.
Thanks.
I'm Bella. And this is Bella.
Pleasure.
And we have a few more students
Great.
joining us in a few minutes.
That sounds great.
I'm going to do your
But-
introduction.
But even so, we recorded and we put it on our YouTube page, so feel free to refer people to it or,
Yeah. Okay.
Dustin Rader is the current interim coordinator of the LGBTQ Center. He came out as transgender in high school in 2008 and became an educator. He has worked with school districts across the Northeast on being more inclusive of LGBTQ plus youth since 2015. In 2019, he began teaching Introduction to Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies here at CCSU and has since found a home supporting students, faculty, and staff by providing education and guidance surrounding the treatment of the LGBTQ plus community. Welcome, Dustin.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
thank you.
So I'm here obviously to talk a little about the LGBTQ Center, what we do. I have right here a poster. This is our event that is coming up on this Wednesday, Lavender Graduation. It is for anybody who wants to attend. If you're graduating, it's a great opportunity to get a chance to sort of celebrate your identity or celebrate your allyship with the identity, various identities. And you get a rainbow cord, which you can then wear to your commencement ceremony. And we do this every year. We've done it since, I want to say, 2009. So this is our 14th annual one, which is very exciting. Lavender Graduation isn't just a CCSU thing. It is a national thing. It actually started in, I want to say, either University of Michigan or some school in Michigan back in 1995, where a person was not allowed to bring their partner to their commencement ceremony because of the gender, the fact that it was a same gender relationship. And so they decided they were going to do a completely separate graduation for students who had this problem. And then it sort of took off, and now it's a national event that most colleges do every year. Yeah. So we're really excited to offer that. And again, anybody who supports the community is welcome to come. And if you are graduating, again, you get that rainbow cord, and it's a nice little moment. And we're really excited. It's going to be really great. We've got tons of good food coming in. Hello. And it's just going to be really fun. So that's one of our big events. The other big event that we do every year is Rainbow Breakfast, which we normally do in October, and it is coming up. It'll be this October 13th. So look out for that on your calendars. It's going to be.
Okay, because so we're trying to keep track of things,
Oh,
because
okay.
that's during Hispanic Heritage Month.
Oh, okay.
And the Transgender Day, right, which was wonderful, was also on Cesar Chavez Day.
Interesting.
So
Wait, Transgender Day of Remembrance or the
The breakfast.
the breakfast.
Oh, the Rainbow Breakfast?
The rainbow breakfast.
Oh,
Right.
just in March 31st.
March 31st.
Yes.
Yeah, so October 13th.
Which is also Trans Day of Visibility.
Right. And it's
So,
also
yeah, it's
Cesar
a whole
Chavez
bunch of things.
Day.
Yeah,
So, but October 13th, you have an event going on?
that'll be Rainbow Breakfast. Yes.
All right.
Normally, Rainbow Breakfast is held in October, but last semester we didn't have somebody in the LGBTQ
Right.
Center to organize it, so we caught up a little bit and had it this semester on March 31st.
Oh, so next year you don't think you're going to have it on March 31st?
Oh, no, we won't. No.
Oh, okay.
It's once an academic year, and so since we just weren't able to do it in October of last year, we're doing it. We caught up.
Okay.
We're now caught up, so it won't be happening again in March.
Okay.
But yeah, Rainbow Breakfast. So that's a day to again celebrate LGBTQ plus identities. It's also, we give out our Rainbow Awards. So if you know of somebody, faculty, staff, administration, coaches, and you want to nominate them for a Rainbow Award, you think that they're a really great ally or a really great supporter of the community, we do encourage you to just send an email to the LGBTQ Center email, which is just lgbtq@ccsu.edu. You can find it on our website, find it on our Instagram as well. And you can nominate somebody. It can be somebody who you're friends with. It can be a professor. It can be a student of yours if you're a professor or an admin. So we do that. We usually we're trying to do now. One member of faculty and staff and one student gets that honor every year. So that's going on. We also have at our Rainbow Breakfast is when we give out our scholarship, which is the Richard Spada and Robert Childers Scholarship, and usually it's split between two kids, two students. So we have that also at our Rainbow Breakfast, which is really great. Having that scholarship for anybody who is part of the LGBTQ community or who has had very, like if for example, if your parents were LGBTQ and that affected your life in some way, that's sort of what that scholarship is aimed at honoring. So those are two of the biggest events that we do each year. We also do a whole bunch of other things. So right now we've just started doing safe zone trainings again. Basically what that is we get a group of people together who are going to be trained on this, and they learn about what it means to have a gender identity, what it means to express your gender, what it means to have a certain sexual orientation or another, and sort of recognizing that like it's not just people who are LGBTQ plus who have these identities and these expressions and orientations, but everybody has a sexual orientation, everybody has a gender identity, everybody has a gender expression. And so it specifically is aimed at sort of creating empathy and compassion between people who may or may not be as familiar with those parts of identity. Because what we often find is that people who are hesitant to be supportive of the LGBTQ plus community usually just don't know enough about it. It's not usually a matter of just like being a mean, hateful person. It's usually lack of understanding. So that's what that's what our training there is meant to sort of focus on is create that empathy and compassion. We also, of course, are advocates for students on campus. So we have a space in Barrows Hall where students can hang out and sort of get to know each other. There's a lounge area in it for people to hang out with a TV. We usually play music off of it. Students have hooked up our Switch to it and played Mario Kart and just done that on an afternoon. We have a small area where students have there's a table and there's a smaller library than this, but a little library thing. So that's just full of LGBTQ plus books. And then we also have our clothing closet, which is for anybody for any reason at any time. It is assuming I'm there because I'm the only key to open it. But you can go in and take the clothes that you need, and we won't ask you what you're taking. We won't ask you why you're taking it. We just ask that you leave enough for the next person and leave it in a clean status, the way that it was when you got there. And all of our clothes are donated, so we accept donations. We honestly have so many donations right now that we don't have the space to put them all up.
That's the story with our books right now.
Yeah, our clothing racks are completely full. We have 4 of them and they're completely full. So we're about to buy a few more because we want to be able to supply that for people. It started out originally many years ago at the beginning of the LGBTQ Center's existence as a clothing swap. So it was a take something, leave something. And the idea behind it was when you're transitioning, you may not have the money to buy all new clothes for the gender that you're transitioning to. But you also want to get rid of the clothes from the gender you're transitioning from. So it was really easy to do take something, leave something, and it was used as that for a long time. And then it got to the point where so many people were leaving things and not taking things that it's now just a take what you need kind of thing, which we're really glad that we can supply. We also have in our office a gender neutral bathroom. It's a single stall bathroom, and it has a shower in it. So if anybody ever needs to shower when they're on campus and they don't live on campus, or they don't want to go to the gymnasium to use their bathrooms because those are gendered, we have that available on campus. And there are a few other places, and we've advocated for those places to have them. So if you've ever been in Bassett Hall, they have the 2 big ones. Those are the really nice ones. I don't understand why anybody uses the other ones, the normal bathrooms, because those 2 bathrooms are just so nice. And they're always super, super clean because people just don't use them because they're like, well, I'm just going to use the regular bathroom. And it's like, okay, you could do that. That's fine. But these bathrooms are so nice. If you've never been in the bathrooms in Bassett, the single stall gender neutral ones, highly recommend.
They're great.
They're so great.
No, people who bicycle to class or who work out at lunchtime use them.
Yeah. and it's super handy. So we have that as well. And of course, as part of it, we have all of our personal care products. So we have like mini deodorants that you can take. We have condoms, obviously, and various other sexual barriers and prevention. We also have like pads, tampons. We're buying wipes so that if you don't want to do a full shower, you can like wipe yourself down with like a body wipe kind of thing. Just to provide that safe space for students who, again, might not feel comfortable going somewhere else for these things. So we also advocate for gender. We're currently advocating for the expansion of gender inclusive housing on campus. So if you didn't know, gender inclusive housing is right now available to students, but they just sort of launched a new process for how that works. So it should be now, it used to be you had to like email them and be like, hey, I want gender inclusive housing. And now it's a button that you press on the survey when they ask you all the questions. So that is one thing that we've done. It is still being worked on to get better. We're looking at making an entire floor potentially for people who want to be around others who are doing gender inclusive housing, and figuring out how that's going to work. So that's another thing that we advocate for. There's a lot of stuff that we do.
This might sound like a stupid question, but what is gender inclusive housing?
I'm so glad you asked, because I did not clarify. So gender inclusive housing is basically the idea that not everybody necessarily feels comfortable rooming with people who are the same gender as them, or they may be like, well, I'm non-binary, so I don't really have either gender. And so gender inclusive housing just gives you the option to choose who your roommate is, regardless of what their gender is. So if you're a woman and you only want to room with other women, you wouldn't need it. If you're a man and you only want to room with other men, you wouldn't need gender inclusive housing. But if you're like, I don't really care who I room with, or you know, I am a man and my best friend is a woman, we are not romantically involved at all, but maybe I want to room with her, that would be an option. So it's not like it's specifically for people who are in the LGBTQ plus community. We were the ones who sort of advocated for it, but as it is at most institutions, it's for anybody who wants it. There's no like expectation that you have to like out yourself in order to get this type of housing.
Is it like co-ed?
Yeah, so it's just a matter of you would be on a floor of a building or in a suite where there is access to both bathrooms to the extent possible. But yeah, that's sort of what that is. And so we're actually building up the language around it and making it a sort of like, okay, if you're going to be using gender inclusive housing, these are some of the expectations of what you would be doing, which is not even like doing, but like expecting that like you're going to be respectful of people's gender identity, you're going to be respectful of people's like sexual orientation and their history and that kind of thing, which is sort of something we should be agreeing to anyways, I think, but it's part of what we're working on. Those are some of the main things that we do. Does anybody else have any questions or thoughts on it? I mean, that's covering a lot of it. I know I talk quickly.
Okay. So I think it's important for people who are here and others who may be eventually listening on YouTube to talk about why it's important to have such a center.
Yeah, I mean, right now especially, there's a lot of legislation going on. If you haven't heard in the news, there are like, I'm trying to remember the exact number. There's well over 400 bills that have been introduced just this legislative session that restrict the rights of LGBTQ plus individuals, particularly people who are transgender. Like restricting their rights to like not being able to get healthcare, not being able to express themselves just in public, be themselves. And there's been a lot of equating the LGBTQ plus community with pedophiles and groomers and all this stuff. And obviously it's just hogwash coming from narrow-minded people who don't really understand. And again, like I said at the beginning, you know, I'm very big on empathy and compassion. And I think that the people who are making these laws aren't coming at it from that angle of just being misinformed, because a lot of the attacks have become very personal, very targeted. And the bills that they're proposing and are passing, I mean, in Tennessee, they banned drag shows because it's harmful to children. Like, no. If you've ever been to a drag show, it's fine. It's normal. It's adults playing dress up. Like, it doesn't matter. And it's so much fun. Like, people have so much fun at these things. And then, of course, Florida with their Don't Say Gay bill, which was originally just until like 6th grade or something, and now it's been extended through 12th grade. So pre-K through 12, you can't learn anything about LGBTQ plus people. If you are a teacher and you say anything about it, you can get fired, which is just wrong because like we're just people that exist, and like it's kind of interesting to think about it because like in the most like messed up way that you can think about it. So bear with me here, like. If somebody wanted to do a genocide, as they sometimes do, and get rid of an entire group of people based on like their skin color, for example, theoretically they could do it because it's a genetic visual thing. But if you tried to do that with LGBTQ folks, you wouldn't be able to get there because it's not based on genetics necessarily. So it's, and again, this is the most messed up way of thinking it. I'm absolutely not advocating for genocide.
It doesn't show up in skin tones.
Exactly,
I mean,
right? It's not visible. You can't tell when a person's born. You have no way of knowing. And there are many people who have just sort of been taught that for whatever reason, very often religious reasons, that it's wrong to be this way. And the reality is that it's not wrong to be this way, just as it's not wrong to be a person of color, just as it's not wrong to be a human being who, I don't know, likes pineapple on pizza. Like, there's.
Oh.
I mean, I'm just saying, and the other thing is that, you know, it's an interesting situation where it's like, we're not even necessarily asking these people to like go to drag shows, right? We're not telling them that they have to. We're not telling them that they have to be supportive even. It's more of a just like, don't remove our existence. Don't get rid of our healthcare. Don't tell us that we can't do what we want with our bodies. Or express ourselves, right? Like your discomfort does not get to decide whether or not I'm allowed to do something. Because ultimately it's not for you, it's not about you, it's about the person who's expressing themselves. So in a time like this right now, it's especially important for there to be an LGBTQ center. And I would say most colleges have one at this point, and to some extent or another, but they're potentially going to be shut down with a lot of the people who are currently running for office, if they're successful, have said that they want to shut down diversity, equity, and inclusion altogether. And so, you know, we're not just here for our LGBTQ students, we're here for all of our students. You know, it's very important to us to represent everybody. So we work pretty tightly with the Women's Center. We have been working more tightly with you in the Africana Center, the LALTC and the Africana Center, because students just deserve to be advocated for. They shouldn't have to fight for their opportunity to be represented, for their needs to be met. So, you know, one of the things that we've done also is working on pronouns getting put into rosters so that students don't have to out themselves every time they come into a class. Having trainings on campus, right, so that people can get educated on these things. Having name change forms available and being able to walk them through this and trying to make it as simple as possible so that they are respected. Because if you don't feel like you're respected, you're number one, you're not going to stay where you are. You're not going to stay in an institution that doesn't respect you. And also so that they don't have to worry about, on top of all of their schoolwork, whether or not they're going to have rights at the end of the day.
But also, Dustin, if I could just ask you
Please.
To think about it a little bit differently. My understanding is that, you know, the age of traditional college-age students is the age when really these issues come to the fore. Okay, I mean, it's starting to get younger, but historically, and that also it's a very significant, I don't know as I want to say predictor, but of mental health issues for students.
Yeah.
Right, and so if we're really thinking about the health of the whole student body, right?
Yeah. And when we talk about the whole student body, I mean, students in general do better when they're not wondering if their rights are going to be taken away, right? So when we've got this concept of you know, having OEI nationwide taken away, this protection for people who are diverse or identify as part of a marginalized community, we have to have this. It's absolutely critical because we want those students. Sorry, I lost track of that sentence like halfway through.
That's okay.
But it's interesting that you say that, like, talking about like age-wise and stuff, because it is absolutely getting younger and younger and younger. And I think that that's really great. I mean, I knew when I was 3 years old that I was a boy, but I didn't have the language to put to it, and my parents didn't have the language to put to it, and so I didn't come out until I was 17, 18, when I finally figured out, like, oh, that's what this feeling is. And it was a really cathartic experience for me to be like, this feeling I've been feeling, there's a word for it, there's a name for it.
So my college roommate came out when we were sophomores.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And as a lesbian, and it was very, very difficult
Yeah.
for her. I mean, we were at a Catholic college that was primarily male at the time, right? And she had to tell her parents and her friends. I mean, it was a real struggle for her, and she flunked out of school that semester.
Yeah.
She did eventually graduate, right?
Yeah.
Come back and graduate, but I saw firsthand what it does to students and the people around her, because it wasn't easy to be her roommate either. And I was just with a group of people that I was in school with then, and I was laughing at one point because a friend of mine on campus said, you know, there were rumors about what's going on on that floor in Bevan that you live in, and I'm thinking, oh really? It's in my room.
Yeah.
But I just think it's very important that we acknowledge and allow students to feel safe. Because the other thing I understand, there's also a connection between homelessness among college students and coming out, because when families don't accept the student, they throw them out of the house.
Yeah, and in Connecticut, it's interesting because we, for a very long time, had True Colors, which
Right.
did the conference, which was a huge deal, which was originally held here.
Right, and now it's at UConn.
Now, and then it got moved to UConn, but they stopped doing it a few years ago, partly because of COVID, partly because just the organization no longer exists. But when it did exist, they were one of the prime resources available for anybody who is, particularly youth, of course, who becomes homeless because of their identity, and finding a place for that person to then stay. Fortunately, here at CCSU, because we've worked so much with Res Life, we've made sure that there is, and I think the Res Life is okay. It did this anyways, but like particularly for our students, is that they can work on getting emergency housing for any student who gets kicked out. There's housing options for students to stay on campus during the summer, during the winter breaks, because of sometimes families are not as supportive as they should be, and especially when we're talking about youth. I mean, literally just today I got the updated 2023 Trevor Project. The Trevor Project, for those of you who don't know, is this really wonderful organization that focuses on the bless you.
Excuse me.
That's all right. They focus on the mental health of LGBTQ plus folks. So they started as a sort of a what's it called, suicide prevention lifeline is what they called it. And then they've sort of expanded since then and done. They do a whole bunch of different things, and one of the main things that they do is every year they release this report based on their survey of, I think this year it's 28,000 students across America, to learn about sort of how their mental health has been affected by the world at large, within their own communities, whether their parents are supportive and all that stuff. And it's consistently showing that like this group of students, this LGBTQ plus youth, are facing far more mental health concerns than the average student. And of course, that's compounded when you get into race and ethnicity and religion. It gets compounded because it's, of course, now intersecting with all these different identities. And I mean, we know how intersectionality works. So and the Trevor Project's research always shows that, and I just thought it was. I always read it. I got about halfway through it today before I had to jump into a meeting, but yeah. So it's important to think about because those statistics are out there. I mean, 40. I think the statistic I saw today was 41% of LGBTQ youth have seriously considered attempting suicide. And that's too big a number. 41% is too big a number for our students. And that is significantly higher than the average student. It's worth looking at. If you have time, if you go to the Trevor Project, I'm pretty sure it's the first thing on their page right now. But it's a lot of really good information. And again, they break it down by age, ethnicity, gender, orientation, etc.
How concerned should we be here up in the north end of the United States when it comes to legislation that's very anti-LGBTQ, considering the turmoil that's happening down in the south more of the southern states?
It's interesting. You'll get different answers depending on who you talk to. But since you're asking me, I think we're in danger. It's interesting. Everybody's like, "Oh, we're safe in the Northeast," and there are like 5 states maybe that have not introduced any anti-LGBTQ plus legislation, and Connecticut is not one of them.
Yeah, it's been introduced, but it hasn't gone anywhere so far.
It doesn't, and I don't think that what has been introduced will go anywhere because, as far as I know, what's been introduced is preventing trans women from playing in sports, which is not going to go. It was defeated in the Supreme Court. This did not go through, and Connecticut, I don't think, is going to change that. For those of you who are wondering about the whole do trans women have an advantage in sports? No. The flat answer is no. All the research that they've done, comparatively, it doesn't matter how much testosterone is in your body. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit or a lot. It doesn't affect your ability to succeed. There are way more other factors. And being trans has officially, has never been an instance of this person has a completely unfair advantage is winning. An example of somebody who does have an unfair advantage and wins all the time is Michael Phelps, right? He has a weirdly shaped body where his wingspan is 10 inches longer than his actual body, which is really rare and not normal. But because of his advantage there, he is a much faster swimmer. And he, as we all know, has won dozens of gold medals. But nobody has ever he has an unfair advantage because of his body. It is exclusively and completely just transphobia that makes people want to do that. Likewise, there was 3 women. The 3 women who won one of the track races, they were all Black women from Africa, from African countries. And after the race, people were trying to get them stripped of their medals because they supposedly had unnaturally high levels of testosterone, wherever it was. And it comes down to, again, that time it wasn't transphobia, it was just racism. And a lot of some of what I talk about in my class is how most forms of organized hatred stem from white supremacy. That was sort of the first one. And then everybody just sort of followed that pattern. I mean, if you even, again, we're getting a little bit off of it, but if you look at the Holocaust, Hitler got his ideas for how to do it, and the Germans, the Third Reich, the Nazis got their ideas to do what they're doing based on Jim Crow laws. That's where their inspiration came from, was how Americans handled people of color. So it's important to recognize that that is the root of all evil, is from that belief that any group is superior to any other group for any reason. And so, of course, we talk about transphobia and sports and that. But the original question that was asked was about are we safe here? And I think that is going to be really dependent on what happens in elections. I think it really comes down to vote. Please vote. Please vote for people who are not trying to restrict the rights of others. Please vote for people who are actively seeking to make the country a better place. Don't vote for people who are being paid by the gun lobbyists. Don't vote for people who are actively making this kind of legislation or who are, I'm sure you've seen like actively throwing out politicians for being on a different side as that. We saw that in Tennessee. We've seen that now in Montana. It's not going to stop if we don't stop it. So vote, be vocal about what you're voting about, what you're voting for. But I would say that we are not safe here, and I think that it is really, really dangerous to get into that mindset of, well, we're in Connecticut, we're in the Northeast, it's never going to happen here, because it is happening here.
Do you think demonstrations would be a good idea when it comes to, legislation or certain things that we just don't?
Absolutely. One of the main things that I'm working on for this upcoming year is how we can be more proactive. This semester is my first semester that I've been in the LGBTQ center, so it's been sort of like have to play catch up and organize rainbow breakfast. Have to sort of figure out, okay, what are the needs of my students coming in here on a daily basis. I don't even have a grad intern right now. It's just me, and I have a few paid workers as well. We have a paid worker program, by the way, if you have work study. And we also have volunteers.
I'm keeping my work study students.
What else
You can
can we
keep them.
do besides protesting? How else can we help? When it
So
comes to those bills that are out hitting the floor.
No, they're not hitting the floor.
I mean,
They're being put up. So far, they're dying in committee. They're
Oh,
not
that's a
being
good
picked
thing.
up.
for a lot of them, yeah. I think that one of the main things that you can do is the ACLU is one of the really great organizations. They have, obviously there's always donating money, but if you can donate time as well, they'll very often have like volunteer events and they'll do protests and stuff. Another way that you can do it is I truly believe that the power of visibility is important. And so like having a flag that you can just like display. And of course, I brought this flag. This is my favorite flag because it has the regular rainbow, and then it has the trans flag colors, and then it's got the black and brown. It's one of the most inclusive flags, one of the two most inclusive flags. The most inclusive flag, this triangle here is yellow and it has a purple circle in it, and it includes intersex identities in that way. I always am like, I've known a couple of intersex people who are like, I don't really feel like I'm part of the LGBTQ plus community. It's this weird thing where they are part of us if they want to be, but that not everyone wants to be. So I don't know. But this is a good flag to have, and it just shows people like, hey, this is a place that is going to be supportive. This is a place where, if I'm being homophobic, I'm not going to be welcome. And that's what we want. We want people who are going to be homophobic to not be feeling welcome. That is, in my opinion, the good thing. We want them to feel like, okay, I can't say this kind of thing. And maybe then they'll have the opportunity to, when they're not saying the thing, to learn the good things. There's also, one of the biggest things that we talk about is going to events, not just protests, like, but Lavender graduation. Having a lot of people there is really great. Rainbow breakfast, having a lot of people there is really great. We're also working on doing other stuff. So we're going to be bringing in speakers. We're going to be doing panels where students who are feeling like it are going to be sharing about them and talking about their experiences. We're working with getting teachers who are willing to share their experiences and bringing in all different kinds of things. So we're working also on, I just started working on this, so it's still very early stages, but connecting with high school GSAs in the area and doing a GSA day to bring them in. The True Colors conference that we used to have was so critical. It was so good for the community, and it's a really big shame that it's gone, at least for the time being. And so having a place for people to come together is really great. But yeah, the visibility, I think, is something that's really easy to do. If you don't already have your pronouns in your email signature, I would add them because it normalizes it for trans people who might put something that might be unexpected there. So I highly recommend that as well. And then educate yourself, host a safe zone training. If you guys want to do a safe zone training here, I'd be happy to. I just need like a week or two notice so I can make sure that everything is all set for it. Sorry, I'm trying to think what else is in my list of things that I tell people to do. If you hear somebody saying something that's transphobic or homophobic, speak against it. If you know somebody who's transgender, make sure that you're using the right names and the right pronouns. both when they're there and when they're not there. Something that we often see people doing is like when your friend transitions after you've known them for a while, you might be like, okay, well, when I'm around them, I will use the name and pronouns that they ask, but when they're not around, I'm just going to keep using the name that I'm used to. Don't do that. It's a bad example to set.
Sometimes it's hard to switch over, and you might make a
Yeah.
mistake. I've done that a few times.
And that's normal.
And I just wanted to say, I apologize, but I'm hoping that it's not looked at in such a bad way
Yeah.
when you're first trying to.
Most people, especially if it's like you've known this person and then they change it, most people are really understanding about it as long as you are clearly and actively making an effort.
Yeah.
And apologies whenever you do it, make it as quick as possible. Like, okay, like sorry. If you're fixing it like that, and then just keep going. Making it into a bigger deal can make it really uncomfortable for the person who's there, because now they have to deal with the fact that they've been misgendered, and they have to now console you so that you don't feel bad. Like, we just don't want that extra step. So just a quick apology and keep going. That's the best way to handle that. Yeah, but that's totally normal, especially when you've known somebody for a while. Switching takes a minute, and that's okay. And most people are pretty understanding about that, as long as it's not an intentional misgendering. Anybody else?
I just have a comment, like, of course, education is very important, and it's unfortunate that, like, certain laws, especially in Florida, are taking away, like, education for, like, middle schools and high schools, because, like, if you don't learn about it, and you're not familiar with, like, the terms, like transgender, then you're gonna continue growing up feeling like you're different, and you don't understand yourself, and you're wondering, like, why you feel so out of place. And they're doing that on purpose, because if you don't have the term and education for it, then you're never going to be like, oh, transgender, that fits me. And then you're never going to go through that. Right? Like,
And we have a lot of future teachers who on campus and who work here, and for whom figuring out how to walk these lines in a classroom, because the last thing that you want, especially as a new teacher, is parents picking up the phone and complaining about you, about whether it's the 1619 project, whether it's LGBTQ issues, whether it's Latino and Latin American history, right? I mean, you're kind of walking into a potential minefield.
It's especially interesting because there's a lot of parents who aren't supportive of their kids when they come out, and so kids will be afraid to come out to their parents and will not come out to their parents, but will come out at school where they're accepted. And legally speaking, at least in Connecticut, I know, because I was a K-12 teacher. I taught high school and English for 3 years. My mom has taught chemistry in Connecticut for like 20-something years. She's retired now. And my dad worked with boards of education for 25 years before he retired last June here in Connecticut. So I know a lot about the laws. I've done this sort of training for pre-K to 12, and legally speaking, those teachers are required to not tell parents if the student does not want them to be told.
Oh, really?
It is,
even though they're minors.
Yes,
Because with violence in the home, they're required to report it,
right.
not necessarily to the parent.
So this is pre-K through 12.
okay.
And basically the idea is that if a student comes out to you and says, please don't tell my parents, you don't tell the parents. I don't necessarily know that if it's a law that you don't tell the parents, but like you are allowed to not tell the parents. That is the better of the choices. Because there is that chance of violence in the home when you are a transgender student. There is that chance that now you're going to go home and your parents are going to beat you for being who you are. So legally speaking, teachers are protected. I don't think you're legally required to keep it a secret. I think that technically you can, but you are protected from that because that's happened enough times that they were like, okay, this is okay. So when teachers always ask, well, what if the parent gets upset? And I'm like, well, then the parent gets upset, and that's their problem. But if they're upset at you, that's better than at least being upset at the kid. We're there to support our students. We're there to protect our students. So if a student ever came to me and was like, "Hey, I'm trans, but I don't know, I don't want to tell anybody," I'm not telling anybody. Are you kidding? No way. That is that child's decision for when they want to come out. And a lot of parents are upset. They're like, "How could you not tell? Like, what? How do you get away with that?" And the answer is, if your child doesn't feel safe telling you something, it is not my. It's not for me then to tell you. That is something where you need to look inside yourself and say, "Why did my child not tell me this?" That's a you problem, not a child problem.
What's the best way to support your child if they come out to you?
The easiest thing I can say is give them a good hug. Remind them that you love them. And then, I'm trying to think, like, when I came out to my parents, probably the best thing that could have happened is, like, that day or the next day, them being like, "Do you want to go clothes shopping?" Because it's like, unless you, yeah, like, I don't think my parents did that. We had actually just come from the mall when I told them. But they were just like, "Okay, yeah, cool, sounds good."
So, Lester, you're talking a lot about transgender students,
Yes.
and I gather that's been a real trend at our
Mhm.
LGBTQ, right? But I've been more familiar with students coming out as being interested in same-sex relationships.
Yes.
And how are you seeing like that versus transgender issues? Because coming out as interested in same-sex relationships, right, doesn't require going shopping,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, it requires a hug,
Yes.
a big hug, but it doesn't
Absolutely.
require, anything can require a shopping trip.
Yes.
If you can, right,
Yeah.
if that's something that you enjoy doing. And I just wondered, like, what are the trends that you're seeing, or like one versus the other?
I see a lot more trans and non-binary students coming into the LGBTQ center than the other groups. I still do see, obviously, lesbian, bisexual, gay, pansexual, whatever sexual they they identify as. But we do see a higher number of people who are transgender, and I think that the reason behind that is because it has become a lot more socially acceptable to be a person who is of a different sexual orientation than the standard, whereas gender identity has been sort of newer a little bit, more, and especially recently, it's been more weaponized. So we have students who are feeling less comfortable about it, students who are like, "Well, my parents say this kind of slur at home, and so I'm scared to tell them." But I do also obviously get students who are varying sexual orientations. And the main thing that they need is just to know that, like, number one, that it's okay to be who they are. They want to have somebody to look up to. So one thing that we're currently working on building at the LGBTQ center is we're compiling a database of TV shows, movies, books, social media stars who they can follow to get that kind of support. If anybody has any recommendations, please send those to lgbtq@ccsu.edu. I think we have a pretty good beginning, but there's still so much out there that we obviously haven't even touched on. But yeah, those are sort of the things there. I mean, it's very much a like, okay, I see you, I appreciate you. And I also will say that asking the person, like, how can I support you? They might just say, just tell me that you love me. You know, they might say, I'm going to go to the prom with my partner, and I want you to be okay with that. And that might be all that they ask. And that's good, I think. That's a good place to be.
We were at competitions this weekend with my daughter, and she's a dancer, and they did a whole skit on the prom, the movie,
Oh yeah.
the play.
Yeah,
It was great.
I haven't seen it myself, but I've heard really good things about it. So, yeah.
So we're actually running out of time.
All right.
But thank you so much for coming, and this is
Thank you
very
for having
interesting
me.
and important conversation to
Thank you.
wrap up the semester.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody, we'll see you next fall.
Bye.
Bye.
So definitely add the prom to your list if you don't have it yet.
Yeah, I should stop this, right?
So stop the
Yeah, I can
recording.
stop it if you want.
Yeah, go for it. I don't want to do it wrong.
Okay.
We have good